All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about Sanderson's laws of magic. He has 3 laws and 1 kind of extra law, so really it's 4, but I wanted to talk about these. We're going to go one by one. I'll read them off, and then we can give some more context for them. I want to keep this episode kind of short, but also beneficial for you as the viewer or listener. Just very practical pieces of advice that you can use to improve your stories quickly. So here is your daily pill of magic system advice. So, Sanderson's first law: an author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. Now, this is simply referring to how does your reader see the magic system? Do they know what's going on? And are they going to be able to understand what you're doing and the problems you're solving? Really, a big question is here, are they able to, if you were to not really set it up incredibly explicitly, are they going to be able to theoretically piece all the pieces together, map their minds of what is possible for this character to do with the magic system that you've put in place? Will they be able to determine the possible ways out of that situation or out of that problem that you as the author have backed your characters into? Alright, Sanderson's second law is limitations are more interesting than powers. This is my absolute favorite, probably one of his laws, except for maybe the zeroth, because I think it was Orson Scott Card said this: a magic system is only as interesting as its limitations because it just raises stakes. Stories are all about stakes and tension. And so when we have characters who are trying to solve their problems, like in the previous law, with magic, we need to be able to understand that they aren't able to solve all of their problems completely satisfactorily to their standards with magic, meaning that they can't simply snap their fingers and everything be done at will. And so this is where Orson Scott Card had a really good example. He was like, okay, I believe he was talking to some of his students while teaching creative writing, and he was saying, all right, you are able to fly. What kind of stories come to mind? And I remember I was listening to someone who was probably paraphrasing that. I was like, I don't know, but you could go 1,000 different ways with that story. Nothing really piques my interest that much because there's so much there, and it's not narrow enough to some degree. But on the other hand, you also have, he said, okay, you can still fly, but you can only fly while both of your parents are sleeping. Now you've got a story, because say I'm in a medical family. My dad, goes on call all the time, and so I might not have that great of a window to go flying when both of my parents are away. Let's say I'm in school. What does that do for my school life now that I have this kind of persona at night where I'm able to fly and I'm getting really into that, but maybe I'm dozing off in classes, my grades are going down the drain, my relationships are degrading. You have so much more conflict because of those limitations, and this is where it becomes all the more interesting to solve problems with these limitations, because if you've set something up and hinted at it and left the crumbs for us to follow back to the cabin away from the witch's gingerbread house, then we're going to be able to really be satisfied by your magic system. All right, Sanderson's third law. Sanderson's third law is expand on what you have before you add something new. Depth over width is what I added there. So this is a principle that I absolutely love, because as world builders, we tend to try to go vista by vista. We're like, okay, I want to create this entire race, and when I say race, I mean I'm going to create their religion, I'm going to create their culture, I'm going to create their food, I'm going to create their language so that I can actually speak it with my super mega fans, and on and on and on. While what is really better is the iceberg method, which is one of Sanderson's examples that he has in some of his lectures as well, where it's actually better typically for us writers, to the readers, to actually write something very narrowly, where we're zoning in and constructing something very complex on a small scale, because from there, the reader is assuming that we've done something very similar because of the quality of this piece over here, when we've just focused here and done what was necessary here, which creates a sense of immersion for that character. And so it's the same way with this law of magic. Expand on what you have before you add something new. With magic, it is very easy to get lost trying to catalog all of the abilities, all of these different things, where instead what we can do is we should just go into situations. I will talk about this method later on in a future episode, where for magic systems, I really like to imagine, what would I do? Because it's hard to think about the character and be like, I have no idea what I'm going to use this new magic system for. I just know that I really, really want to use it. I just don't know what my character is going to do with it. And so if you go out in the world and, you're on a walk or something, and you're thinking about that magic system, and suddenly you're like, oh, pretend I'm the character. What would I be doing with the magic system right now? What would I be adding to my life? What would I be doing in that sense? That is often really helpful. But if you do that on a very niche scale, where you're looking at the level of kind of a grain of sand on the beach of your magic system, and you really hone into that, it is that, again, that immersion where you spend a little bit of time on everything else, but majority of time on your one thing, that is going to lead to a very strong magic system. But none of these are really as important as the zeroth law. So Sanderson's zeroth law of magic is always err on the side of what's awesome. Okay, it doesn't matter if your magic system is actually scientifically accurate, because it is so complex and it is essentially just our world science. If the reader's not invested, we have to err on the side of awesome, because our characters are really the ones we are writing for in the end. As authors, sometimes we say we're writing for ourselves, and I think that is true. It's important to be entertained by what we're writing, but at the same time, we need to be entertaining our reader. So awesomeness is the thing that can entertain both of us. And so I hope you will put those thoughts into your brain and percolate on those until the next episode. Let me know what I can do better, what I can improve on. Sorry for the rushed quality of this video. Blessings. I would like to try to get a little bit better at this. And if you have not already, I do have another podcast out right now that is Zero to Hero Author, a podcast where I interview authors on what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, and very niche topics for you guys to take away as much as possible from their writing journeys and make the great choices that they've made and avoid the mistakes that they've made. So if that sounds interesting, check out the Zero to Hero Author podcast with myself, Xavier Schwint. I already have one episode out on that, which is interviewing Josiah DeGraff on darkness and light in fiction, as well as his new book, A Study of Shattered Spells, which is now out on Amazon. So go check that out. Without further ado, thank you guys so much for tuning on. I'd love it if you would subscribe to this podcast or leave a review. It really helps us reach more people. And feel free to email me at xavierschwintwrites@gmail.com if you have any podcast episode ideas, questions, concerns, or rebuffments. I would love to hear them. So, blessings.